All right. Welcome. Welcome and greetings, students, faculty, staff, and our distinguished guests. This is a special moment for the College of Architecture for multiple reasons. And first, I'm going to talk to you about the first visiting lecture series, opening lecture by Nick and Jes Deaver today, but also I'm welcoming special guests and to honor these and celebrate the legacy of Bill Smith, FIA. So what I can introduce to you that since a year ago, then I was your interim dean, now I am your dean. And what we started is basically to open the lecture series with an alumni event. So a year ago, we had Pavlina Ilieva and Kau Pao lecturing, both of them alumni. And now we have Nick and Jes Deaver. Our chair of the visiting committee, Tara Mayer, will introduce Jes and Nick in more detail. As architects, I believe it is important that we keep ourselves informed, current, and engaged with our profession. I look at it as a fundamental part to look outside and see what's going on in practice. As students, especially beginning design students, and I see some of you I will see later in my class, freshmen in particular, this is a window to the world of where you might be in 10, 20, or 30 years. You might be the ones standing right here and lecturing to us what you learned. So that's what I really appreciate about our guest lecture series. So the Texas Tech University slogan, "From here it is possible," you will literally see that indeed it is possible of two distinguished alumni who had success out in the world and now give back, and those who come and see and what they did with their work. It is never as important as it possibly is then from the originator, the creator, him, herself, to hear about their work. So this fall lecture series is entitled Resiliency, which actually loosely means the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. Now, if you sort of think about the last 2.5 years, you know, you can start thinking about it, well, this or that to overcome. We had to work in distance. Some of you graduated while you were actually taught through the distance, and we have all overcome in one way or another these past two pandemic years. I want to shift now to Bill Smith, which I must say, I never met Bill Smith, even though I'm here for 25 years. But someone who is specific about the future, future endowment must have had thought a lot about where the endowment goes and what it might mean. So design and communication, I was actually thinking quite a bit about that. Design and communication, that's embellishing everything architects do. If you do design well, that's half of it. But if you don't communicate well, your design doesn't go anywhere. Those two specific ingredients in the day of social media choices, where Twitter caps their maximum by 280 characters. I should shut up right now. Communication is a big part of what architects do. Design and communications might just capture the essence of what an architect needs to be successful. And Bill certainly was a very successful architect. We want to express our immense gratitude to Bill for his generous donation to the college, as well thank his family for their continued support, the generous donation to the college, as well for the continuous support throughout his lifetime and beyond. Gifts like these ensure that our students are given the highest caliber education possible. And we can not emphasize enough their importance in propelling our mission at the College of Architecture. So please allow me to present this plaque to his brothers, no, to his sons. Sorry about that. His brother is here too, so Jack waves, so just that they know. So, as you know, for those of you who have siblings, which you do have, you never have as close a sibling as you have siblings. That's about as close as it gets. But I want to have Brett and Clay. Where's Brett? There. Okay, that's Brett. To come up here and present this to you in honor of that. So thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you for. I also would like a photo shoot right here. If you can have the extended family out here, we have a photographer ready, and you just go sit there and we take a picture of all of us. Thank you. Thank you once more to the family for coming, making that trip. I should have mentioned that the endowment was actually given us literally in the middle of the pandemic, and in a way it's kind of that resiliency theme ties this all together as something we're coming out and leave behind it. So without further ado, I want to give the microphone to Tara Mayer. She's our Director of Architectural Programming and also Chair of the Visiting Lecture Series. Thank you, Tara. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I start, I have an announcement. This is from Rachel Rowe, who you might have seen in the hallway. So the AIA has approved this lecture for 1.5 health, safety, and welfare lecture units. So make sure you sign up for those. Email Rachel at rachelrowe@ttu.edu. That's Rachel, RACHEL.ROE. And she'll submit your information for continuing education credits. And she'll need your name and your AIA member number. So as Upe mentioned, I'm the chair of the 2023 lecture committee, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's lectures to you today, Jes and Nick Deaver. Nick Deaver hails from West Texas and is an alum of the College of Architecture. He earned his Bachelor of Architecture, or BArch, from Texas Tech University in 1981. 1981. No, you're not. His desire for new vistas and his deep admiration of Charles W. Moore led him in 1982 across the country to New England, where he landed at Moore's firm, Centerbrook Architects. His long tenure at Centerbrook was hugely transformative. His spectacular drawing skills, thank you, Texas Tech, and Texas can-do attitude found him collaborating directly with the company's partners, who quickly trusted Nick's talents and sensibilities. In 1992, Nick had the winning design for the Connecticut State Parks competition for excellent in state parks architecture. His designs, chosen from a field of 52 submissions from New England architects, were constructed throughout the Connecticut State Park system. Many other award-winning projects were rooted in renovation. such as the project in which she took a turn-of-the-century animal science building and turned it into a state-of-the-art genetic laboratory. Then, in 1998, Nick returned to Texas and established Nick Deaver Architects in Austin. His firm focused exclusively on residential projects, and his work continued to gather multiple awards and garner much interest. Recently, Nick's residential design, Lean-To, spelled Leantoo, earned, among many others, a 2021 National AIA Housing Award. The project Rayvon received a 2022 Honor Award for custom period or vernacular renovation, was widely published, and on arcdaily.com was one of the top 50 projects viewed in that year. But let's step back to New England for just a moment. That cross-country move was highly transformative for another reason, beyond connecting Nick with a nourishing architecture firm. There, Nick welcomed the birth of his second daughter, Jes, who also joins us today. Jes has always had a strong interest in storytelling and connecting people with their environment. This led her to the University of Texas at Austin, where in 2005, she earned a Bachelor of Science degree in radio, TV, and film. As a writer and filmmaker, Jes worked in Texas and New York City, producing short films, screenplays, and science fiction stories. A few years later, Jes was back in Austin, taking a break from the New York rat race, working at her father, Nick's firm, making films about architecture. Something that surprised them both occurred. She was snake bit, as Samuel Mockbee's Rural Studio documentary describes it, and decided to pursue architecture. Jes graduated in 2016 from the University of Houston Graduate School of Architecture and Design. She worked in Los Angeles at Pfeiffer Architects on projects such as the Gonzaga University Myrtle Woldson Performing Arts Center, the Technology Commons at the historic downtown Los Angeles Public Library, and the development of Pfeiffer Architects' social media communications. Recently, she joined her father's firm and became his design partner. Sometimes she travels back and forth from Austin to Houston, and sometimes the two simply test the limits of Zoom with 12-hour design charrettes. While her interest and activity in filmmaking continues, she has now expanded her practice of storytelling about the built environment into the production of the built environment itself, and sees the design process intimately interwoven with multiple narratives. Together, Nick and Jes describe their design practice as careful, conscious, and collaborative, and they are very excited to share recent work with you. Please join me in welcoming Jes and Nick Deaver.
Can everybody hear me? Let me know if I go in and out. I do have a little allergy today, so if you can't hear me, just give me a signal and I'll respond. Upe's kind of given me a little bit of has intimidated me a little bit about this idea that architects have to be great communicators. I just want to tell any of those in the crowd, that especially in the students, if you feel like that you have some intimidations communicating about your work in front of large crowds or in even small ones, you're not alone. That you don't have to be a great speaker. You don't have to be a teacher. In fact, I'm a practitioner, and I let the work that we do speak for us. And this is something about our idea that we're going to share with you today, that we speak through our work as well as our words. And first of all, let me thank you all for inviting Jes and me to share with you our work and basically to joining you in your conversation about architecture. It's an honor as an alum who first heard the words of the voices of architects and became immersed in the architectural language right here where you're seated. This is the time I've been where you are. But I also should tell you, since I've been here this afternoon, I keep hearing the voices of Walter Calvert and Virginia and Dudley Thompson, Jim Williamson and Jim White, professors that were here and made such a difference in my life. But let me begin by just letting you know that there are foxes and zombies among us.
We're all part of a living, breathing system. And honoring the land as an ally in our work is really important part of our conversations that we have about design. Place keeping as well as place making as partners, and also continuing this legacy of a conversation about architecture. Today, we're hoping to expand a little bit of our conversation that we have with you.
Well, let me welcome you to my Austin neighborhood. It's in central part of the town, just west of the Capitol. It's a teens and 20s neighborhood of craftsman bungalows and classical revival houses. Many central city neighborhoods like ours are under constant pressure from redevelopment, tear downs, and people relocating, trying to downsize from their large suburban lives. There's a reoccurring theme of new overscaled homes. This is our home and studio, a renovated 1916 craftsman bungalow on a sloping site. We added 1,800 square feet in an apartment and studio underneath our 1,400 square foot antique house. Its concrete and glass structure are carved into the ground. The idea was to keep the original historic streetscape correct. You can see in the back, we have aluminum louvers that we've added that shade our back porch from the harsh West Texas sun. They move independently in the wind. This is our studio and think tank that's underneath our living room. It's what I call my 13-step commute. It's quite a lifestyle to be able to choose to do what we do, to actually love your work and to have it so intimately close. In this place, it's our place for messy ideas. Jess works here with me and sometimes in her Houston office.
So what are we talking about with land as an ally? It's seeing the land as more than a resource. It has voice, it has requirements. Texas is really spectacular because it actually has over 1,300 different soil series. And in that soil, 25% of all known species on this earth is found. Our buildings are part of the desertification of the land currently because of the nature of foundations. They require soil structures to be removed, and they also are cutting trees down, taking soils out. And to give you a brief understanding, soil is very different than dirt because soil is full of organisms, water, different life, microbiomes, and dirt is soil that has died. So it's emblematic of a lot of our impacts as architects and the things that we're going to be experiencing and the challenges that we're dealing with. And we have a role to play in whether or not it lives or it dies. As designing with the land, it's really important for us to reduce environmental damage. And we all hear the words about sustainability, but we care about it even more because it promotes equity. We care about it because it celebrates the processes that are found in nature, and it enriches everyone's life when we really partner with it.
One of the great ideas that we have is to listen to the earth and to learn from it and to make sure that our houses are responding to it. One of our clients who work in creative fields in Austin wanted to raise their children closer to nature. They found this fisherman's cottage in Wimberley. The original structure was built on a sloping site, pinched between a rocky hill to the west and a gully to the east. The driveway you can see is abrupt, creating rude entry to the house. Our idea was to connect our clients to their new community, making their place more like Wimberley, a small community that has been attracting musicians and artists and has an unusual combination of raw elements and sophisticated sensibilities. Our design, an asymmetric composition in paint grip galvanized metal, allows for the bright white interior to bleed out to the delicate refined white edges. we decided to embrace the relationship of the drive to the entry to avoid additional scarring of the land. This in favor of elongating an arrival sequence. Our modest north side addition contains the owner's suite and a new writing studio. And it's separated from the kitchen and kids' rooms by a dog trot-like space that connects us to both the hill and the arroyo. Our focus was on the intimacy with the earth and minimal thresholds.
This is, again, going back to the idea of communication. Sometimes it takes a partee of the climate or of the location to understand the site and to be able to communicate that to others. These site-built windows maintain an 8-foot ceiling height, and the floor-to-ceiling wraparound panoramic views of outside create a feeling of cinemascope, if you're familiar with that, giving you a firsthand view of everything that's going on.
We like there's an economy here and a contradiction, the idea of high windows and low ceilings. It allows for the fact that we can, on a relatively modest budget, we can provide an experience where we're reducing the threshold from the outside to the inside, but without spending a lot of money and maintenance or even cleaning time for the large windows.
It's a very pervious site, and so you can see the welded wire fabric here creating a guardrail and also allowing vines to grow upon it. So it's encouraging nature to continually change and be a part of the architecture as well. And this goes down into the arroyo. During significant rain events, it's really interesting because all of the animals rely on that arroyo seco when it starts to rain to collect water for them and to actually be able to drive the water for them to sustain themselves. So you'll see it's almost a wildlife party whenever it rains. This is our client's son. We like to call Instagram our post-occupancy report. So we keep a really close relationship with our clients. We care very much about them, and we learn about how our architecture lives by seeing them live and grow within it. This is such a fantastic expression of exactly what our clients asked for, which was to live closer to nature.
You know, that you made a point that I wanted to say something about, and that is that essentially architecture or better architecture is created with clients that have higher goals, and it's really born out of a relationship. So we don't see our work as transactional. People don't come to us for a set of plans. People don't come to us to solve their problems. They may come asking for an extension to their house or some new aspect that they're seeking out. They rarely come to us asking for architecture, but it's our job to bring those ideas with us.
Architecture is experienced by all.
Our second project here that we want to show you is we call Lean-To, was a very modest house. Our clients had found this 900 square foot cottage in a very hip Travis Heights area of downtown of Austin on the south side. They wanted to preserve the quaint structure, but were unsure on how to deal with the leaning tree. Our solution involved removing the vestiges of the front porch. The land rises almost imperceptibly. So I changed almost imperceptibly. And the new entry terrace partners with the live oak, needing less steps and no railings. Our 1,000 square foot addition is only hinted at by the new carport roof. And I just want to say, to add to this comment, we've doubled the size of this house. And what we're actually talking about is the preservation of our neighborhoods, these communities, there's a fabric and a texture that is there that gets spoiled when these things are, when the houses are demolished and erased. And our client was interested in preserving what was there. And we wanted to just point out the fact that this 900 square foot house has been enlarged by 1,000 square feet. And it barely has a consequence to the street. At the front of the property, one of the biggest challenges of this has to do with the land. This property in the neighborhood is actually on the low spot of the neighborhood, where it has a storm water inlet near the street. It directs water back to the creek, actually bisecting through an easement that bisects the backyard of our property. This created a dilemma for any redevelopment. Our clients and we entered into negotiations with the city for the air rights to build very near and then sometimes over this over the drainage system, as long as we did not spoil it. Another aspect of this design is that Austin protects its urban forest. They regulate development near trees that they call heritage or protected, trees over 19 inches in diameter. And so a lot of care has to be taken to protect them. We also have surface drainage to contend with here because of the severity of our weather. When we have a rain event, it not only fills the stormwater drainage, but it surface drains across our site, threatening what would have been our addition with surface runoff. So we've raised the floor off the ground with concrete piers. The terraces follow the ground, but allow surface water to flow unobstructed to the creek.
And I think that there is an idea of, or an attitude you can take when you're looking at some of these challenges of directing water away from your building, of treating the water as something to be removed or something to be shifted. But by understanding where it wants to go, understanding the land is telling you what it needs and what it would prefer, you can work with it. And sometimes you will receive all the gifts and the better architecture from it. That's the enriching part.
That's just to be clear about that. When Jessica was originally saying, listen to the earth, pay attention to the land. This is what we mean about the fact is that the architecture is a reaction to what the land is telling us.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that each piece of land that is unique, it means it helps us, it leads us to a unique architectural expression.
Mm-hmm. We actually use, just to comment, we use diamond piers here for the terracing because it was actually a more porous foundation system. It's sort of a soccer ball, hexagonal soccer ball with posts that form the structural load. It can't take as big a load as a house, but it actually is a really interesting idea for terracing to allow water to run and for us to get really close to the root systems without damaging any of the tree roots.
You can see the interaction of the old house and the new. Important to us that we basically learned and responded to the old. I like to think that we can't really do our job very well if we're asked to renovate a house if we don't love the original house. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to focus on what it is that we add and what we change, but we think it's important that we spend enough time appreciating what's there to begin with. You can see here at the back of the house, our clients, even though it was a couple who wanted to live very close to nature, it was important to them that they had regular groups of friends that come over and meet with them. And this basically entertaining dining space that we've designed off the back is just an extension of the outdoors. One thing I'd like to mention here is that as we were coming up with a form for the house, we were trying to decide that between the traditional and the more modern new elements we were adding, how much of a balance we wanted to create between the two. And it became important to us that we make a modern portion look like it belongs to the old house. And so we used a 1/2 and 12 pitched roof, which we thought was both modern and traditional. And here, finally, you can see that we used some corrugated metal off of the old carriage house roof that was removed. Another topic we'd like to talk about is really, I'd like to just share with you some inspirations, and that is that here you're seeing the museum in Hammer by Sfera Finn. It's a museum built in a traditional agricultural building over a medieval fort ruin. It's a new place founded on a place worth keeping. This reminds me of Charles Moore, who was well-traveled. He loved people, and this is one of the reasons that attracted me to Connecticut to join his legacy firm there at Centerbrook. And that was that he understood that architecture was about people, and that he thought that his work was in placemaking, not object making. As architects, it's our goal to create cherished places that function well for not the environment, just the environment, but also for people.
And in recent years, there's been a lot of discussion about placemaking and how it can be and how it is evolving. Wanda Dala Costa is an architect, a practicing architect and professor who co-designs with North American indigenous communities. She's also a member of the Saddle Lake Cree Nation. And she began this conversation about place keeping. And that has to do with the layers that you can see here in this picture of the Hammer. It's appreciating that there are already existing values that can enrich not only the architecture and the site, but enrich the community as the architecture becomes a part of it. So the opposite of what we have with place keeping and place making is place losing. And that's something that we all need to be very aware of. This is actually one of our current projects that's under construction. We're going to show you some images. A client came to us, a couple from Palo Alto, and they were interested. They fell in love with Austin, and they decided that they wanted to design a modern home, a new home in Austin to retire in. And they found us through the local AIA chapter. And after some conversations with us, getting to know us and our interest in understanding and preserving a lot of our community and neighborhoods, they started to see how they could live a life that was modern, with a modern lifestyle and amenities, but also appreciating that quality and maturity of these older houses and the existing structures. So you can see here, they found this house, which is in Travis Heights. It's a 1 street long local historic district, so it has some requirements to it. And this house was very loved by the neighborhood, but it had been derelict for about a decade. It's at a very interesting skew in the road. And so the houses don't sit perpendicular to the street. And it also has a very interesting height to the floors because of the significant grade shift across the landscape. It's actually very high, sits very high outside of the land. So we started by removing the unfortunate large concrete afterthought that was put in the front for a porch, and thinking about creating terraces that would allow us to enter up to the height of the house more gently.
Basically trying to settle the house back down into the ground by bringing the ground up to it.
It's a quirky storybook structure, and it has some interesting juxtapositions to it that we really enjoyed and the owners really enjoyed. And so we've been preserving and repairing a lot of what was existing of this antique, delicate house, thinking of it as refined and delicate, and our new addition as being more of the raw and modern.
It's also kind of important, we might want to point out that our clients were unsure what they thought of the quirky nature of the house. But what's happened is that through our conversations, they've realized that what the quirky aspects of the house is what makes it unique. And so the planning of the house with the skews and the modern takes that we've made on the inside of the house were all started from that appreciation for what made it unique.
This is a study that we did for the siding. It's a cypress, a rough hewn cypress siding.
One thing I would like to point out is that I'm not sure that we made the point that our clients really loved modern architecture, and they had a modern house in Palo Alto and imagined this house being, I'm sure they thought that this house might also be what they were thinking as modern. And you might be sort of surprised that we're looking at raw materials that might not be what you would think of in a modern house. But this is the conversation that we're talking about having with our clients, where we're giving them ideas of what's modern. It may not be what you know or you think is an expression of modern, but it's maybe the attitude you take towards that material.
So again, on this site, we had some significant heritage trees that we were protecting for city code, and also because we love them and the owners loved them. And we came up with this concept of being able to cantilever the new addition over the root system so that we would actually be able to be inside the home, but sit and enjoy just underneath the trees.
This is an interesting idea, and I think in a way a bit of a development in my architectural career, and that is that maybe the more bold that I've gotten, the longer I've spent in the profession, the more chances I've been willing to take with my clients have been willing to follow me on. It's partly the idea that architecture, even as an idea, can be enriching. Our clients wanted a modern life, but they did not define what that meant. And our thought that designing maybe a surfboard under the trees that they could spend really close time in nature might be an unusual thought, but we think that it's going to turn out to be something that they love. And as I pointed out earlier, it's important to us that we design something that connects to them on more of a spiritual level.
So you can see that cantilever out here from the outside pushed back, creating that bridge. And so here is a gray fox inspecting our attic system and checking out the space. What we love about this picture that our wonderful builder took one morning, early morning, is that nature is all around us, even in an urban experience. So it does not matter how urban you are, there are always living things around you, and being able to not just notice them, but also to think about where you are cohabiting with them and how you can help them cohabit better and live better. That improves our architecture.
They're watching us, but maybe we're not watching them. And we think that it's important, even if we're not building a house for the wildlife, we're thinking about the consequences of the house we're making to their life, because even our clients don't want to displace the nature that's around them. Now, this is a project. We're just going to show you a kind of entry addition here. It's actually a whole house renovation and addition. This is in a neighborhood, one of our post-war, I'd say 1930s neighborhoods that's going through a renaissance due to the fact that it's local, its locality, and its walkability. We set our large part of our addition back pretty far so that we can maintain the quality and the scale of the neighborhood. And the idea, we're not going to show you much about this house, but it makes a point that we wanted to make, and that is that architecture can be inserted into a neighborhood and a new life can be given to this structure without the expense of the neighborhood. You'll see here where our house is a contributing structure to the qualities of the neighborhood. I think in this slide, if you look very closely at the very end of our focal point, that you can see that our project at the very end of the street remains modest and quiet. But while in the foreground, what we want to point out is the more bloated house that disregards the neighborhood fabric, we think a kind of bully. These houses are a kind of zombie architecture, acting like a house, but unconcerned about its impact on the street and on others.
People move to these neighborhoods specifically because of the maturity, grace, and charm they have. And then they proceed to dismantle it once they get there by removing the house completely and building new. So we have a strong hope that one house at a time, we can preserve these neighborhoods and create an impact that's informing others of how they can also have all the modern amenities and also how they can live larger, more modern lifestyles, but in these homes without erasing them.
And it's our belief that that this isn't the result of clients not caring. It's the result of architects, our designers, our developers not caring. In other words, if you gave any one of these clients who are choosing to scrape and start over and do an entirely foreign and new out of scale structure in the neighborhood, if you gave them the choice of a good design that met all of their needs, that fit in the neighborhood and was a contributing structure, they would follow you. They would appreciate that. That's our job, to teach that. It's that conversation of architecture that I think we feel a responsibility for.
You can see here some structures in a mature neighborhood called Terrytown that are extremely form-based and lack any connection or context to the scale or relationship to the ground or the neighboring houses.
Once again, what's the product of not caring enough, of not paying attention enough to not just the scale? That's one element. It's easy to see, but everything else. Most of our clients who are moving into neighborhoods, they do care about what their neighbors think, but they don't know how to respond to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we as architects can bring to the design table, where we're basically letting them on their own behalf appreciate the fact that they are affecting not only their property, but others.
This is a project of ours called Canvas. And it's located in that Terrytown neighborhood on the same street as the houses we just showed you. It's sat down into the landscape, enjoying a lot of the mature trees and foliage. This is the before at the bottom. And one thing that's interesting is that you can see that a lot of the changes to it may seem minimal at first, but they're significant as it impacts the architecture. One of the reasons that a lot of folks think that they are not interested in retaining an older home, this is a 1930s home, is that they have some spaces that don't function the way they'd like. One of these challenges in this house was that the kitchen is located in the central core of the house, away from windows at the front and the back of the structure. So one of the things that we discussed was putting a light well through the center of the house. This allowed direct light to come into the kitchen and also brought filtered light, diffused light into separate spaces as borrowed light in the laundry room, the owner's bathroom, and in a hallway upstairs.
One of the things I'd like to point out here as an architect, that when we're given a challenge, one of the things that I learned at Centerbrook Architects was this idea that problems are opportunities. That essentially, if you want to do an architecture that has a unique quality about it, or you want to make a statement that hasn't been made before, one of the ways to do it is to embrace the problem rather than start over and put in larger windows in the house. The idea of inserting a shaft of light down the middle of a very dark, simple traditional structure not only gives it its own new architecture, but it solves the problem in a unique way. This is a slide that I wanted to show today because I wanted to make sure we talked about inspiration. And I visited Sverre Finn's Pavilion of the Nordic Nations in the Biennale in Venice, and it changed the way I thought about architecture. I was in awe of how he had created northern light in this southern climate using crisscrossing concrete beams that filtered the harsh Venice southern light. That was the beginning of my conversation with Finn. You see, architecture is an unbroken conversation. It continues by what we leave in the physical world in our work and in what we leave in the people.
So my contributions to the conversation about architecture are sort of outside of architecture because I came from a film and television background. On the left side, you can see this is 16mm celluloid color film from an Italian film. And when the celluloid is actually, I don't know if anyone knows how it runs, but it's actually projected between a lens and some spindles. And one of the things that's really interested between the light and the lens is that you begin to see the moving image through the projection. So this was being used in an elevator as a treatment behind a piece of acrylic. And so in a way, it was metaphorically still on a journey vertically. It was going up and down in this elevator system as a wall treatment, but at the same time, it made the person in the elevator the lens in a way. It's really interesting.
Still recalling the story in the film.
And Texas Architect Magazine, I really wanted to encourage everyone to take a look at. You can actually find copies all the way back to the 50s, 40s at usmodernist.org, all free to look at and search, and searchable PDFs. One of the things that's really interesting about the conversation of architecture is that of late, we've become much more glossy about it. When you're in school, you get used to critiques, and they can be rough and they can be very harsh, but sometimes those conversations create such an enriched piece of architecture and a design idea. Nick and I talk a lot about design, but we don't see it as a defense. We don't need to defend our design ideas to one another because it's a conversation. And so it's a continual thing that's always improving and getting better.
One of the things that Jes is pointing out about, she's mentioning Texas Architect Magazine, is that they have made a decision lately to become more of a critical journal, not just, as she put it, a glossy magazine. And it is true that when we go out into the world after our education is over, we lose that comment back from our peers and people who are challenging us. And we need that because that conversation is between everybody. And one of the things that Jes and I have done is that we participate in that conversation with our peers through awards programs that we enter. We do our projects. We don't, our clients know that we don't do them for the awards. What the awards program is about is so that you can become involved in that conversation. Because before we were doing that, we would just sit in our offices and do our project. Our clients may love us or not, but we didn't know if we were making any impacts on our profession and how are we actually changing others' attitudes about design. And so I want to encourage everybody to think about the fact that you're beginning a career where this conversation is only beginning, and the criticisms are the challenges that mean that you're talking not just to your professors today, but to the professors they had. And it's a great legacy.
This is a collage from one of my science fiction stories. When I moved to Houston, I became acutely aware of the climatic events that are happening there and how it's affecting and evolving the architecture. So you can see a modest home, row house home, and a interesting townhome, which are very common in Houston, sort of buoyed up. This is a collage I put together as I was thinking about how we could respond as architects, and as part of a short story, science fiction short story. The editor of Texas Architect published part of that because he thought it was important that we look creatively at how we can address some of these things. So there's a place for a lot of your creativity, even as an architect, to be able to express that and influence and make change. This is actually one of my favorite pictures of storytelling. This is a dessert by my husband, who's a pastry chef. And It actually tells a fascinating story about his history coming from Mexico and also about Mexican chocolate. So this one dessert on one plate tells all the different forms and ways that chocolate is experienced, created, and enjoyed in the regional areas of Mexico. Even the outside casing is a white chocolate made to look like the raw cacao bean that they actually import every day from Mexico so that they can roast, grind, and create their own creations with his chocolate. Storytelling is such a huge influence on me in architecture. And if a plate like this, if food can tell this much of a story, I feel like our architecture can as well.
Our last project that we're going to show you today, we call Rayvon. It was a special opportunity to continue an architectural conversation that was started between the celebrated Texas architects, Charles Granger and Arthur Fair, with their clients, the Barclays, in 1956. We continue this conversation with our clients. At times we had to ask ourselves, what would Fair and Granger do? And we worked to improve the resolution of their design with current technologies. We learned also from Fair and Granger that 7-foot ceilings could lead to 11-foot ceilings and be comfortable and uplifting without excess. That's kind of the idea that even though we have architects that have preceded us, sometimes we lose knowledge, and looking back allows us to reclaim that knowledge if we stay open and pervious to ideas. One of the great challenges on this project was the idea of how do we respect the intentions of the previous architects and to know when to deviate and to make the house fit the new century's lifestyle. This was also part of that continuing conversation. The other challenge was how to resolve a non-existent rear yard on a steeply sloping site. We added a new pool and concrete terrace that cantilevers 20 feet above the sloping ground. Our clients now swim in the canopy of the trees.
This is actually one of our clients, and she is cooking in her kitchen for I think it was an Edible Austin magazine. And one of the things she had always said was that she didn't want a magazine kitchen. She wanted a working kitchen. And so we like to think we gave her both. Ours is a living architecture. It's one that's in partnership with the earth and one that we care about as opposed to one that is uncaring and zombie-like. Architecture that is demeaning or empty. Our hope is that this conversation today can continue so that we continue having it with you and we can learn a little bit about what your interests are. So we wanted to open up for some questions. If you are, what are your concerns?
Yeah, one of the things I thought might be fun for a conversation is maybe if you guys were willing to tell us what made you want to study architecture. And I think Jes was saying, maybe what are your inspirations? If you would share them with us, or would any of the students do that with us? Don't be intimidated. Okay, yes, behind you. Yes.
Hello.
Making something on stage before now. I want to make it more permanent.
That's a great quality about this profession, is that you have to get used to something, and that is that it takes a long time. Our work is slow. Clients come to us, In fact, sometimes when people come and approach us for the first time looking for for their architect, they may not even make a decision quickly. We may hear from them in a year. They come, or they may be in a hurry. We don't know, but it may take a while. And our process takes a while. We, in fact, tell our clients when we meet with them, we say to them that we have a careful process that we'll take you through. We think it'll be fun, but we want you to be an educated client when you're making decisions that are so important. And so they need time for that. And so we say we're not going to be the fastest architects. But what I like to say is that relationship that you get to build with a client that takes time, the reward is great. Because what happens is you end up making quite a difference in their life. And I have to admit, it's one of the things that when I was a student, I think I had my mind on becoming famous or doing great buildings that everybody would love. But I can honestly say that the biggest reward is when you're invited into your client's home and you see the pride that they have, that they've invested in some idea that was new, and not just new, but it went beyond their expectations. It's a great reward.
So this is a bit more of a comment than a question, but I was born and raised in Houston, and thank you. And over my I guess now 19, almost 20 years, I've seen numerous beautiful classical buildings that speak to the culture and the tradition of our great peoples being, taken apart and replaced with what my father affectionately calls McMansions. And so one of the things that, I really took away from this was how y'all do a very interesting way of, adding on these modern techniques, this modern style to the pre-existing and the already, the pre-existing designs and these pre-existing buildings, and preserving the uniqueness and the breath of life that flows through them. And I just wanted to say that was, very, very inspiring to me, especially as a new student. So
thank you for that. I almost have to comment with your comment, and that is that it's important what you bring, because your clients are going to bring their desires. They have vision. Sometimes we'll have a client that'll say to us, we know what we like. We know what we want. That used to be intimidating, like, oh, well, then you don't need me because you've already got that figured out. But I realize what that really means when somebody says that is it means that they care about what they want. They don't know, they're on a search, they're willing to be taught. And every one of our clients, every one of our projects would have, if we had given the advice, let's tear it down, let's do something new, they would have followed us. But when we said, here's an option, here's an alternative, we can love what we have and still give you that. And what I find remarkable is that clients are ready to learn these things. And so there's no excuse for why we're losing our neighborhoods. Why, and when I say losing, and we use the term zombie architecture, we didn't show you anywhere near the context. Literally, Austin is because of the influx of the population and the cost of the land has gotten very expensive in the center of the city. People are constantly coming in and saying, get rid of that little thing. I want to build the big thing. And as I say, if you bring an attitude like that, and this is key. It's the reason Jessica and I are saying, what is your attitude about the future? Because to do an architecture that is uncaring and insensitive, the eastern part of Austin, it is being erased. And it was a lower social economic neighborhoods. Literally, historically, we can't get buildings put on a historic register, or we can't get a neighborhood saved. And I'm sorry to you probably have a comment, but But one of the things that's happening in Austin now is that the neighborhoods are rising up and creating these local historic districts. And the only value in the local historic districts is to say, hey, we don't mind people coming in and becoming a part of here and changing the community somewhat, but just care about us. Don't do your project without. And I kind of want to make a point that I failed to make in our presentation, and that is that many architects will approach a problem with too narrow blinders. And you'll see a lot of presentations of work where we're excited about our building and we show it, our one building. You step back one step and you notice the building beside it is 1/4 its size. And there is a result there. The result is the house that's 1/4 its size has been demeaned. The value is gone. And a battle ensues. There's literally a struggle on the street. And then every other house that changes in the neighborhood has to decide which side of that battle am I on? Do I say, I'm going to give up? It's too hard. All you have to do is build a big house on the other side of me and I'm lost. And we have that battle to make. And that's the reason we say, kind of tongue in cheek, but very seriously, that there are foxes and zombies. You can pay attention to the land. You can pay attention to things that go beyond what your clients care about. And ultimately, this is our point. What do you care about? You're the architect, and you're the one that's going to be asked to direct the population, direct the direction that our development goes.
Yeah, I would say that
Thank you.
that goes also back to, you'll hear a lot of conversation about relevance. Are architects relevant now? Are we relevant to the cities? Are we being invited to these conversations with municipalities as cities are being designed? And we think of relevance as our responsibility. It is our responsibility as architects to make it relevant. And we do that in a way by looking at the land for answers, by caring and having those deeper conversations, not just with each other and not just with our peers, but having them with everyone around us, because it's impacting everyone around us. So that one house that we design on the street is for one owner. It may seem that it's exclusive because they are the ones that get to enjoy it. And the people in that neighborhood may be exclusive because they get to enjoy it because they live there. But it's really part of a much larger conversation. And so saving one house at a time is a way for us to be able to add to that conversation in an equitable and responsible way.
Yes, okay.
There are two more parts to this annual event.
Yes.
I would like each of you, because most of us are students, I'm a bit an older student here, still studying. Each of you to think, you have a lot of experience, Nick. Jessica is still at the beginning, but you both have actually been educated. So both of you going through your education, what is the thing you wish you would have been taught and you were? And it doesn't have to come in the success now. So
Yeah.
What is the thing? And I mean, it's not for our students, some of them literally just started architecture, literally less than a month into it. What do you wish you would have been taught, but you might were taught or you were interested, but you never were really taught? And then basically, I just want to explain that to you. So we have a testimonial here, more than one. I believe David Messersmith will talk about Bill Smith. And then after that, so you can have a more intimate area to talk about in our Huckabee Lounge, the corner. Both the families and Nick and Jess will be there. So first of all, the questions, and then I would like to have David come up here and share a few.
Let me do first.
So,
Okay.
yes, go ahead.
That's a very good question. I'm not sure I'm going to have a great answer, but I will say this. I came to appreciate architecture more. It became richer to me the more I experienced. And so one of the things I would say is that how do we get experiences? Architecture is something to be experienced. We've shown you slides. Unfortunately, you haven't experienced any of these houses. They don't feel like this. They're different. I think better, but our glossy pictures are telling a story. They are ways for us to try to convey to you what it is to work on a design. But what we do when we get a client is that we actually have them, we say, before they hire us, we say, why don't we take you to one of our houses? They meet our other clients, they see the house, they experience it. Then the conversation gets better because they start to understand that architecture isn't just a visual thing or an object to talk about. It's an experience. And so I guess the thing I might say about my education is that I would have liked maybe a broader experience, meaning that what does that mean? Walter Calvert had a class in modern architecture that he taught, and he was so he had this passion. He would literally every summer he would get in a van with some students and travel the United States and take pictures of modern houses across the country. And he would come back and present them in his slideshow. I was not one of the students that ever did that travel, but I shared in his slideshow. But what I wanted to say is that I wish I had been on that trip with him and experienced it. So I might encourage you to think about how through visitation, you might, for students who are beginning to learn what architecture is, it's when you go to this house as opposed to seeing it. So it might be that you could encourage more practitioners like us to invite classes to be able to actually be present in some of the architecture you're talking about. And then when you're talking about it as an idea, you have something to relate it to.
Thank you.
I think when I was a student of architecture, one of the things that no one really told me that I wish that I'd known then is that you should always be humble and excited to not know anything. And I think that's something that even in our society, we don't appreciate, is that architecture is not that you reach some level, you will not attain a license and then be all knowing and be ready to go for every project. It is a constant challenge, and that you have so much to learn from every single person that you're around. Just one example, when I started working in Los Angeles, I was, as they say, green as a blade of grass. And one of the things that I did not understand was, how do I get a more personal involvement with this firm when I don't know enough to be as useful to them? They've invested in me by hiring me. How do I become useful immediately? And one of the things that I noticed was that on my first day, Norman Pfeiffer, who was the name of the architecture firm, who was from the very well-known postmodernist firm that you may have heard of, Hardy Holtzman Pfeiffer. He said, we need to get more involved in social media. And he was in his late 70s at that time, and it was just crickets. No one had any interest in talking to him about social media. And I just raised my hand and said, I can help. I'll do that. I didn't even have an Instagram at this point. I did not know what any of this was. And I was able to have the opportunity to work directly with him in meetings, just him and me. And I learned about his design thinking. I learned about how he sees the world, which is so critical to my growth as an architect. And it, in some ways, had nothing to do with the built environment. And so I would say, just be willing to do things and be excited about not knowing, and just ready to learn anything, because you have no idea where it will lead you.
Well, thank you both. A round of applause for this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we make a bow to the way we began. It's not done yet here. Design and communication. I would like to invite David Messersmith to come up front here and share a few words with me and with all of us. And also, I believe his brother Jack has prepared, but I'm starting with David. And then after this, after the remarks, we're gonna convene in the corner. So David Messersmith, FAIA, also an alumni. So we really make it a whole alumni event. Please come on here, you have the microphone. Okay, I just want to make sure you're being heard. Can you hear me? Here. There you go, because we have an audience also online. So
Oh, we do? Okay. All right, then I will stand here.
And round of applause.
I just want to thank Jack Smith and the whole Smith clan for being here today. You came from great distances, and we're honoring really an icon of our profession. And it's so appropriate, I think, that Bill Smith's endowment is for communication. You just saw a wonderful example of communication, and my hat's off to the Deavers for your efforts to, just communicate with your clients and educate your clients. The Bill D. Smith FAIA Faculty Endowment for Design Communication couldn't be a better title for what Bill represented, because Bill D. Smith was a great communicator. He knew the power of the spoken word or the written word to inform, enhance, or magnify the design work that architects do. He was always trying to think of the proper phrase to write or the best word to say in order to educate a client or persuade a building committee or to inspire the work that he was doing in his firm and his colleagues were doing. So great communicator, yes, indeed. Bill Smith could wordsmith with the best of them. He was a prolific and an extraordinary architect, the head of one of the legacy legendary firms in Dallas, Jarvis Putty Jarvis, or JPJ, as they came to be known. This firm created much of the Dallas skyline and much of the Dallas infrastructure. If you're familiar with the 72-story Bank of America Tower, the most photographed building in downtown Dallas, probably the tallest building, outlined in green light. I think it was Bill who started the trend of lighting our buildings at night. And today, if you look at downtown Dallas and other places too, you see the evolution of his thinking and his leadership and his ability to communicate. I don't know if the green light was his idea, but I think it was. It's the color of money, after all. And imagine his education, his communication, his persuasion with a client that maybe really didn't ever even think about outlining their building in green light. Lots of other buildings. The Prestonwood Baptist Church, one of the largest and most dynamic churches in the country. He was a member, but he was also their architect, and he called it Fort God. Fort God in the office was the biggest church in North Dallas. He was a dedicated and unapologetic modernist. He would point with pride to the Student Rec Center on this campus, just across the street, across Flint, as an example of one of the few buildings on this campus that was allowed to deviate from the mandatory Spanish Renaissance style. You're probably in another one, but there aren't many. And I happen to think that it was his power of communication and persuasion that convinced Texas Tech all those years ago to allow the respectful interpretation of Spanish Renaissance, but without slavishly copying every detail and every carving. I'm not sure, but I don't think Bill ever really embraced the notion that buildings on a college campus in the 20th century should look like churches and cathedrals in Spain in the 16th century. And that's just the way he was. And he was able to communicate that. He graduated from Texas Tech in 1963. In 2002, he was the 21st distinguished alumnus of this college. He loved Texas Tech. And he knew that it was his education here that propelled his success in a profession that he really didn't know much about when he got here. He would tell you that. I didn't really know what architecture was. And he called this Harvard on the Plains with a sly grin and a loving attitude. I'm sure that the Smith family lore has many examples of the stories he generated when he was here at school, having to turn in his Speedo when he had to give up the swimming team in order to concentrate on architecture, nervous meetings with deans, and he was so full of those. We love to hear them too, and I know you heard them. But I have to wonder, what would he say if he was here? And since I talk to him regularly and consult with him on matters of importance, allow me to predict what he might say if he was here. I'm sure he would remind us of the power of communication, especially as it applies to architecture, but also just pure words on paper, words from your lips. I think you might say some things like, never use a big word when a diminutive one will do. I think you might say, in writing, passive voice should never be used. He might eschew the merits of the Oxford comma. And no doubt at some point he would probably look at me and he would say, David, I think it's time to put this speech on a word diet. So in that spirit, let me just say, here's to the new endowment. Here's to Billy Dale Smith, my friend, my mentor, a great, great communicator.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David Messersmith. So you saw the circle coming, everything coming full circle. I like to put a bow on it. I want to invite those of you to go into the corner and basically have refreshments, have questions, have stories, mingle, communicate, as Bill would say, and actually introduce yourself. And hopefully some of you will be here 10, 15, 20 years from now, telling us about your work to new students in architecture. So thank you for opening this alumni event. Thank you for participating. Smith family, thank you very, very much for your gratitude, your generosity. Without contributions like yours, we would not be here. A round of applause for the Smith family, and thank you. So our students know the corner is literally diagonally. So when we go all at once, but sort of thank you for coming and I'm happy to talk to you.